The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the March 29th Westminster Special Study Session. Again, this is an item this happens one Monday out of every quarter where the council comes together to look at items they'd like to discuss for future consideration. We will have our normal report of city council members tonight. We have a presentation still from the COVID group that was delayed from last week that we will try to get through. And then we have 5 items that are scheduled for discussion tonight that the council had asked to be put on the agenda. Those are the items that we'll be discussing when we get into that part of the session. At this time, for the purpose of the record, Ms. Parker, would you take the roll call?
Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Councilor DeMott.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Sites.
Here.
Councilor Seymour.
Here.
Councilor Scully.
Here.
Councilor Smith.
Present.
And Councilor Bowles.
Here.
All right, I will turn to start with to the council members to see if anyone has any reports from this past week that they want to bring forward. Councilor DeMont.
Thank you, Mayor. As one of my duties on council, I'm the liaison to the Butterfly Pavilion. So I just wanted to share kind of what they talked about today in the Butterfly Pavilion board meeting. One of the things that they highlighted that I thought was kind of neat is that they were awarded to be in the I think they said Silver Sage in the Sage Sustainable Business Program that the city of Westminster does. So that was kind of neat. They highlighted that being part of that program to their board today. And just they had talked about a couple things that they partner with us. So even though I know, they're working towards their new facility in Broomfield, still a great partner and a great resource for the region. So I wanted to highlight that. And then besides that, for those of you who are observing Good Friday this week, as well as Easter coming Sunday, I wanted to wish you the best as my family will be celebrating those holidays as well.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. While I was out on spring break last week, I did still attend the NATA meeting and just wanted to give a quick update on that meeting to all of you. We did receive an update from Smart Commute by Karen Stewart and Carson Creve. They went over some grants they're pursuing, their Bike to Summer campaign, and their employer-based trip reduction program. And there will be a more full presentation on that at our next month meeting. There was a report from all of the RTD directors. There's a lot of work going on with the accountability report, and with the new executive director, Deborah Johnson. I did just forward to you all, member Julie Mollica, as you may remember, is a representative on the RTD Accountability Committee. I did forward you guys a report of what her subgroup's findings were, so you can review them. I think most of them, all of us would agree with and think they would be helpful. We then went over the NATA priority project lists for discussion, and the action item on that will be taken in April. There was a reminder to have key city staff look over the priority list to make sure each community's priorities are encompassed in that list. So I know that the staff liaison was going to take care of that. Then we had an update on transportation legislation, both already introduced and the very big speculated on bill. I also sent each of you a PowerPoint with the most recent information on the proposed transportation bill, even though we know that bill has not been at least released. I don't know if it's drafted, but has not been released for general consumption yet. So did send all of you the PowerPoint so you could look that over and included staff on that as well. And then finally, there was a presentation on the Revitalizing Main Street Stimulus Program from CDOT. There's a new round of eligibility here in, I think, starting applications is late April. So did forward that to you as well. There's another tranche of money I mentioned at last week's meeting that's been put into that. So not sure if there's anything in Westminster that qualifies, but thought I would make sure we were aware of that opportunity. Again, for a lot of different residents of a lot of different faiths, this is a big week. Passover has begun. I believe today or tomorrow is the start of Ramadan. And for many Christians like myself, this is Holy Week. So I hope everyone gets to celebrate. I know it is frustrating that we're still not able to gather as we would like, but hopefully this is the last major holiday where we have to be separated. Thanks so much.
Counselor Vols.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to briefly commend our Public Works team. I was out this afternoon with some of my neighbors, and our street cleaning crew came through and hit our neighbor. They spent the afternoon here street cleaning. It looks fantastic, and I want to thank. So if City Manager Tripp would please pass along, or if Public Works Director Max Kirschbaum is on this call tonight, if you could pass along to the crews, thank you. It's a great service our city does in providing a great service. It keeps our neighborhoods looking good and fresh and clean, and it's very important. So thank you, and thanks for the hard work. And they were very friendly and a good crew out here today. So, and then I also want to join with my colleagues, Councilor DeMott and Mayor Pro Tem Seitz, and wish everyone a happy Holy Week and a happy Easter. So thank you.
Other comments, Council?
This is Anita. I just would be remiss if I didn't mention that it was also Nowruz. The Persian community always invites council to participate in the Nowruz celebration, and I believe this year they were able to work with the Boulder Art Museum to do an entire display, and that was our local Persian community, and I just wanted to recognize that as well.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda for tonight, our discussion on the COVID response. Mr. Tripp and Mr. Kirschbaum team.
Okay, I think that's me. Hi, this is Barbara Opie, Deputy City Manager. I will be taking this part of the presentation tonight. Max is enjoying an evening off, much deserved. So for first item, if I could have the slides for today's weekly COVID update, please. So you have our case data as we normally report. New cases are in the 130 range as of Friday. Again, this data up on the screen is from Friday. Adams County is 128 with yellow, and Jefferson County at 133 on Friday. But they were down to 105 on Sunday and staying in the blue area. Our percent positive is holding steady at or below the 5% range. And as of today, around 5 p.m., the state positivity rate did jump up from 2.41 to 6.79%, which is a pretty big change in over the weekend. And so we're continuing, obviously, to monitor that. However, Adams County and Jefferson County data generally stayed pretty the same. Next slide, please. As it relates to hospitalizations, we were at 361 as of Sunday. We were holding generally steady for the last week, but as of today, our hospitalizations grew another 20 people since yesterday. So we're up to 382 hospitalizations, but again, still hopefully staying in that general steady range. Next slide, please. For vaccinations, 2.5 million have been administered in Colorado through Saturday. 1.6 million have been on one dose, and 1 million have been fully vaccinated. Again, noting that the 1.6 million plus 1 million don't equal 2.5, as we are having more and more individuals who are getting the one-shot vaccine. Some good news I wanted to share is that we have been working with Advanced Urgent Care in our community, and they just got word today that they will be able to start administering vaccines starting this week at our Front Range Community College location. We've been partnering with them to help get that moving. So they'll start providing vaccinations starting on Wednesday through Friday. They'll be able to provide over 1,000 vaccinations in those several days. And they are on slate to be, they anticipate receiving over 1,000 doses per week for the next several weeks, again, keeping that location up. We don't have all the details or finalizing that information. As soon as we have that information and registration website information, we'll make sure that we share that with the public. Secondly, is I'd like to give a shout out to the mayor that he has been working with Health One to provide vaccinations for city employees and their spouses over the age of 50. We are scheduling that for April 10th. A lot of details still being worked out, but we really want to thank the mayor and Health One for this opportunity to help get our employees vaccinated and their families. We'll have more information that we'll share with staff here shortly. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Then go back one slide. Sorry, that's the next item. So if you could just go back one slide, we'll just stay there. So just a couple things just to recap for us is that as we're in the dial 3.0 now, that outlines the 7-day incidence level, percent positivity, and hospitalization level. So blue rate is 36 to 100 cases per 1,000 and a positivity of lower than 5%. A yellow is 101 cases to 300 cases. Thank you. Where I was looking. And percent positivity of just under 7.5%. These slides that are here up give you kind of the summary of the different restrictions. I guess the three ones I really wanted to highlight was for schools, preschool through 12, in-person is allowed for both blue and yellow. Restaurants, 100% capacity is allowed at blue with 6-foot separation. 50% capacity or 50 people in yellow. And then lastly, for outdoor events, no state restrictions are in blue levels. 50% or 175 people are in yellow. So we'll continue to monitor how these impact our ability to partner with other entities and what happens within our community. So we'll keep you posted as we move forward with that. Two other items just to cover for tonight was to let you know, we don't have a slide on this one, so we'll just stay here, is that our third-party delivery fee cap is ending on March 31st this week. As you may recall, back in January, City Council approved an emergency ordinance ratifying the city manager's emergency declaration, imposing a temporary cap of 15% on third-party restaurant delivery fees. And so with that, we put in place just a capacity to try to help with the restaurants and with those delivery service companies. The date of March 31st was done in consultation with many of the other surrounding jurisdictions based on seasonal conditions that allow for outdoor expanded dining to resume. And so again, that is scheduled to end this Wednesday. Lastly is the upcoming in-person city council meeting preparation. That's the next slide, please. Michelle will join me here in just a moment, but just want to circle back. And back in February at our post-council meeting, we discussed with City Council proposed phase-in plan for in-person meetings for hybrid council meetings. At that meeting, we outlined a 4-phase process. Phase 1 would be focusing specifically on City Council and very limited number of staff in person with public participation remaining remote. Michelle's going to go through that here in a moment. Phase 2 is that continued hybrid in-person with council and limited staff with remote public participation encouraged, but allowing for some limited public in-person testimony for public hearings. Phase 3 would expand that same phase 2 level, but expand to include in-person public comments. Again, the limitations will be dictated based on public health orders and how we have to space social distance individuals out and how we're able to fit that capacity within the building. Staff has been working really hard to try to identify different ways that we can funnel folks through. So if there's more than the amount that can fit within the 6-foot social distancing, that we're able to do so. And then phase 4 will be completely open. Now with that, we City Council selected April 12th. That's their first meeting in person to return in person with that limited staff in attendance. I do want to highlight one thing before I let Michelle run with it, is just to let you know that we appreciate the additional time you provided us since February to do that. It's allowed staff to complete some preparation work and finish the installation of the upgraded makeup air units to our HVAC system and the new needlepoint bipolar ionization system at City Hall. That ionization system has been installed at several of our facilities, all of our fire stations, public safety center, and we're working on trying to get that into some of our recreation centers as well. So two enhancements to our air circulation system and cleaning purification system as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle to talk a little bit about the phase 1.
All right, thank you. Good evening, Council. Thanks for taking the time with us to chat about our upcoming phase 1 first in-person meeting to take place on April 12th. Just going to go over some of the things that we had set out in the phases, which may be redundant. I apologize from what Deputy City Manager Opie just covered. But just to reiterate, this first meeting, Monday, April 12th, 2021, will be a City Council meeting. We will still have the ability to host council staff and any outside partners who wish to participate remotely. So that is always an option on the table moving forward for all of the phases. In person, we will have members of City Council, up to 7 of you, of course, and minimal staff will be attending to help support as well as to participate in the meeting. Just to reiterate, the public comment and any public hearings that we might have scheduled when that agenda is published will all continue to be remote. We will continue to offer our 3 methods of participation, which of course are the email, voicemail, phone number, or the live link to the meeting to speak live. Those who are coming to City Hall will be passing through a COVID symptom check station that will be located directly at the entry. Masks will be required inside City Hall and council chambers per our current orders. As we get closer to this date, we just want to let you know we will be sending you much more detailed communications via email that will list what type of equipment you'll need to bring with you, as well as any other details that might be pertinent to how things are going to change just slightly in this new hybrid environment. Earlier today, you were sent an updated appointment for that meeting to accommodate a system check that will begin earlier. We will have staff on hand for at least this early part prior to the meeting to help you with any setup on the dais, to ensure that all of your equipment is functioning, to make sure that we don't need to go and grab an extra cord or an extra headset or anything like that. And then we will get together with everyone who is joining us remotely, do a system check prior to the meeting, and start promptly at 7 p.m. So we look forward to seeing you guys very soon, and more information to come on that shortly.
Thank you, Michelle. If council has any questions related to that, we're happy to take them. If not, we can go into the next portion of our agenda.
Barbara, we have a question from Councilor Scully.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I just want to commend staff on all their work on helping us get ourselves back to City Hall. It's really important that we be in front of the people, and I'm excited that we are finally coming to this point. On the vaccinations, I'm just tremendously proud and excited that our city is the work that we're doing on the vaccinations. Thank you, Mr. Mayor Atchison, for your work to bring vaccinations to our city. It's a very important move, and I really appreciate it. You said that, Barbara, I'm sorry, Ms. Opie, you said you would have vaccinations at Front Range Community College. I'm just curious, and I know you kind of implied this, but I just want to make sure that when people want to sign up for that, when it is available, will they go to our website to do that, or will they go to the Front Range website to do that, or how will they access that information?
We'll have that information available on the city's website. I'm not certain whether Front Range would be able to do so as well. We can certainly reach out to them, but at this time, we'll have it on the city's website information.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Councilor DeMott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just curious about setting up a time this week, so I don't know if I should reach out to Cody or you, Barbara, as far as being able to come in and see what's set up at City Hall. I know I'd asked about it before and I hadn't had opportunity, but my kids are on spring break this week, so it'd be a good week if there's a time that would be convenient for one of the staff to meet me there.
We'll reach out to you to set that up. We can also I'll take some photos of the room as well, so that you guys can see what it looks like as well. So for those who aren't able to come in advance, we can at least share that information.
Great, thank you very much.
Councilor Vols.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to ask a question. I'm not sure if this is best to Ms. Opie or our city clerk or city attorney. We are currently doing this video type of meeting, and we're all zooming in on this format. As we move forward, and we're doing it because we changed an ordinance and there's an emergency order. As we move forward, do we need to change our ordinance let me give you an example. If we want to continue with say for instance, someone is out of town, and normally we would excuse that person, but say I'm out of town and I have an opportunity to catch the meeting in the evening, and I want to do that and still be away for business or whatever, do we need to change our ordinance to allow one of us? Is that a possibility to do kind of a hybrid type thing, even in perpetuity, meaning in the future, if I'm out of town, could I still get on my laptop and zoom in and be part of the meeting, or is that not a possibility?
Councilor Voles, you jumped right into the next topic, but yes, that's one of the things that we had, that actually Councilor Seymour had identified as a discussion item. So that was one of the things we were planning to chat with you about.
Great minds.
You're right on the cue.
Thank you. I'm sorry to jump the gun.
No worries. But yes, it would require a note ordinance change if you want to continue. Right now, the ordinance is set up so that it's only under the emergency declaration. But that is one of the items we can discuss at the next session.
Okay, great. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, sir.
All right, for the council and those listening in regards to the employee vaccination piece, even though this afternoon the governor said that on April the 2nd, they would open it up to everyone from age 16 and above to be eligible to get vaccines. That will not be offered on the April 10th piece because those vaccines have already been ordered and we can't expand that any further than they are. So on the one on the 16th, for all city employees and city council, along with any spouse 50 years or older, those will be able to be registered. And based on the hours, it will not require you to leave the strategic planning event early because they will be open until 8 p.m. The links to get that registration will be provided to Ms. Opie and team later this week so that people can start to register. The only piece I wanted to bring up in regards to the COVID too, Friday was a week ago, we met with the governor's office and his staff on the pending healthcare order that was issued last Thursday. And we continue to point out to the CDPHE that telling a restaurant they can have more people, but they still have to maintain the same amount of distancing does not give them additional seats. It just says you can claim you got more capacity, but you can't violate the 6-foot order, which does not give them any additional capacity. We asked for them to consider the CDC perspective on what they were doing with schools to go down to 3 foot. That would allow more capacity, and they declined. So the order is out. The current order expires on April 14th. We should get a new order on April 15th. We are discussing with them the possibility that the COVID dial may go dormant, but it would still be required that masks will continue at least right now through May 15th when the next order comes out. The one thing they have told us that if they decide to have the dial go dormant, anytime a county goes back up over the dial numbers, which are currently established, they could be put back under the dial. So those things are still being discussed. There's not any of that formalized at this point, but we should anticipate another update to the public health orders no later than April 14th. Councilor DeMott.
Thank you for the information, Mayor. I'm just curious, and I've asked about this before, since we're going off of the governor and CDPHE's guidance. Does it make sense at some point for us to remove our mask mandate and just follow their direction so that there's not an extra layer if they change us to a situation where we wouldn't have to mandate masks, so that you know what I mean? So if it comes off from the CDPHE and they say you guys are good according to our dial, that our residents don't have another hoop to jump through.
I would tell you right now, that's not likely to happen. We will stay under the state and the county orders. We would have to have them both take off the mask mandates. And based on the governor's staff, he is not considering at this time, at least not before the mid-May timeframe, to removing the mask order. So we
100% agree and understand. And I guess my point is we have those in place. And I just, once we get there, and I'm not saying we're there, it seems that it's an extra layer that's unneeded since we're going by their guidance at this point. And I know that early on, when the council decided to adopt this, the idea that was given to us was that there was no guidance from above. So we wanted to be ahead of the curve.
I would tell you that I don't know that that's going to make any difference, David. Whether we have it or not makes no difference. We're still going to have to follow the state and the CDPHE. And I get the point. You think there's an extra layer there, but this will run out eventually when the health order says that we can get rid of it. So it's not helping us or hurting us, either one, with that order from the city being there. Mr. Franklin, you have a comment? I saw you jump on the screen.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Tripp, I don't mean to jump ahead of you if you had a comment, but I will be happy to respond in that. Councilor DeMott, you're correct. Our mask order predated most other mask orders in Colorado. And over time, as new orders came out, they differed slightly from the city's mask order. And I think that there likely will be a time where it would make sense to modify or remove the city's mask order, in that it might cause some confusion if the terms of the other mask orders that are in effect are different. So I do think that is an option for City Council moving forward to consider. So yes, I think maybe the shortest answer to your question, I think the answer is yes, that it could be brought forward for consideration.
I guess my ask, without having to belabor this, is maybe next, because I don't think we're there this month, and I know that we usually review where we're at with emergency order, that maybe we could just make that a point of review at that monthly review of the emergency order, just to say, does it make sense to reevaluate that? And you know, I'm just trying to be forward thinking and being a little hopeful, and you know, with the vaccines rolling out, things are changing pretty rapidly. I mean, the fact that the governor came out and said 16 and above, and I know that's, you know, dependent on supply, things are just rapidly moving, and I want us to allow people to get back to normal when it makes sense, without having to go through and do a whole bunch of different motions if we can avoid it.
Absolutely, that can be incorporated into the monthly update regarding the emergency order. Also to consider the different areas that are subject to the mask order. Obviously, part of that order addresses city facilities, but other parts of that order address outdoors where social distancing isn't possible. So I think that it'd be worth discussing options in both realms.
Great, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Other comments or questions before we go on with the rest of the COVID report? All right, Ms. Opie, I think we're back to you again.
Thank you, sir. I think we're done with this part of the presentation. I don't think we have slides for the next segment, which is the discussion with City Council about the items that were raised. If we'd like to go back there, and then I think, Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you to lead us off.
All right, so we have 5 items to go through tonight. The very first one, I believe, was brought forward by Councilor Seymour. And I think most of these are being incorporated into what we're looking at on the phased reopening. But Councilor Seymour, if there's any in there that you don't think have been answered, why don't we highlight those, and then we'll see if staff have any comments for the rest of them.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And acknowledging staff, I think I wrote this about a month and a half ago. So stepping ahead of that, and staff rightly just kept going. And so, and I want to thank Councilor Voles for the segue. That was great. After commercial, we'll be talking about this. So, but looking forward to what we'll have to develop as our council rules, and expanding the way that our residents can meet with us now, and looking forward to the future. You know, even, you know, at phase 4 fully opening, and being more accessible to all residents, those residents who don't want to go out at night and testify, or are unable to travel themselves, keeping into the future, even after emergency orders expire, the opportunity for those residents to call in and leave a comment, to you know, maybe eventually video their comment, and or do that live, but yet remotely. This pandemic has opened up, you know, a wide world for many people. I know 90-year-olds that are Zooming now. So it's been a great thing for families too. So that's really was my intent on this subject. I think we've already got a good spot moving for the interim and the hybrids. And then just looking forward as we fine tune those in the future, how can we incorporate those into council guidelines and rules and anything that we can make from that standpoint. I hadn't thought about Councilor Vo's discussion about would we allow a member of council to remote in at that time. Weather issues or whatever, we wouldn't have to cancel meetings because of that either. So I just wanted to open that up. The fine point of it, as far as the meeting in place are being dealt with staff. The other items on there too is that I've seen closed captioning of meetings to be able to integrate that in multilingual closed captionings. How we can look at a software package that integrates that opens us up to the whole world. We could, I've seen the closed captioning that works pretty well on some Facebook Live type things, that it's automated. And I believe that there's multilingual options on there that people can pick. And that's just fantastic for our residents and as far as transparency moving forward. So appreciate that opportunity. If anyone has any comments, I'd love to hear them.
I've got a couple of people lined up. Just one, Councilor Seymour, for your question. In the past, we have had remote participation. This is before COVID came up, for council members who might have been on the road for business or whatever. The only thing we didn't allow at that time was any participation remotely on our executive session. However, we have overcome that issue, that we are doing those now. So I don't see that continues to be a problem. We have allowed participation remotely prior to this. I don't know that we ever changed our council rules about that. So that might be something we need to update per the comments you and Councilor Bowles are both making. Councilor DeMott, you had a question or comment?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a comment, really. I appreciate my colleagues bringing this forward. I know for a long time I've heard about maybe potentially incorporating video. I don't think that it was ever proposed in the way that it's ended up going down, but I recall former Mayor Pro Tem Alberto Garcia bringing up the want for video multiple times in his tenure. So I actually am very excited about the opportunities and what we'll call silver linings through a bad 12-14-month period. I think that the accessibility that this adds to people to be able to participate in a way where they're a little more engaged is kind of limitless. And I really, we always want more people to participate in these meetings. So whatever we can do to continue pushing down this road past emergency orders. I know we probably have some actual changes that we'd have to make in order to make some of this stick, since those emergency orders kind of allow us to do it. But I certainly am in favor of exploring those opportunities and figuring out how we can use these learnings to continue to be more accessible.
Hang on just a minute, guys. I'm going to ask you to pause for a minute. We're trying to get Don in so we can see his camera. Ms. Parker, I believe the city manager is trying to get in, but I can't see his camera. There he is now. I can. All right, now he's back with us. All right, Councilor Seymour, you had a comment.
Yeah, just an add-on too with what City Clerk Parker was discussing, as far as being our first system. I would encourage my colleagues to go out to City Arvada's site and see how our neighbors have dealt with this throughout the entire pandemic, and how they moved, with protection behind the dais. And it seems by watching those, limited staff, council and mayor at the dais, and how they're communicating and how they've worked all the way through the summer in person. And they had some big issues that were coming up, so I'm sure that helped them to be together, discuss that, and how they did that, and how that transformed, because that's all on their YouTube site, and you can click into different parts of meetings and see how that works, and not have to sit through an 8-hour trash meeting. So that's it. They've been a real bellwether on getting back safely, but still being able to have that conversation face to face as it is. So I encourage you to their meetings.
Counselor Bowles.
Yeah, I just want to kind of reiterate what I said earlier when it was outside of the topic of the agenda. So now that we are in that topic, I do want to say I do support if we can make changes to our ordinance and to our council rules. I just want to say I also support making those. If someone can come in remotely and not miss a meeting, I think that's a good thing. So using this technology moving forward, I would like to see that. So I think, I don't know if we have full consensus here, but I would like to just add my voice to that direction as well. And then I thank Councilor Seymour for bringing this forward. I appreciate it. And then also all of our staff working on this. Our city clerk's office and city clerk, Michelle Parker, have worked really hard on this subject. So thank you for all your work on this.
I would also recommend the rest of you take an opportunity to similar to what Councilor DeMott asked. The stations are all set up down on the dais, and they have been for several months. So if you have an opportunity or you have a question before we start running around other cities, go look at what you already have in place. Councilor Smith, I'll come to you in just a minute. Miss Opie.
I'm sorry. Please let Councilor Smith go, and then I'll just, I have a couple items just to share in light of the conversation.
Okay, Councilor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This question is really for Mr. Frankel, because I think we had this protocol added into our rules for virtual meetings. I don't know if that was under the emergency order, but I'm pretty sure that we made a amendment to our procedures, and it is official that we could do that. Is it not?
So there were two sets of changes that occurred. Back in March of 2020, the ordinance was updated to allow for remote city council meetings in a state of emergency. That was not allowed before that amendment passed. So now it's allowed. If council desires, to continue remote participation options post-emergency, that would just be another code update to describe what types of participation council was comfortable with allowing going forward and under what circumstances. That would be one code amendment, but Councilor Smith, you're correct. We also did update the council rules protocols with regard to how these meetings would be running. And we had a lot of great work done by Michelle Parker and her team as far as how the meetings are going to be run with IT's assistance and the order of these agendas and the mechanisms for people to participate remotely, whether by email, voicemail, or live audio comment. In the past, our council rules and rules of decorum did not contemplate allowing recorded video public comment, but it if live comment that is now happening via audio is desired to occur by means of video, I think that would be an update to the council's protocols, as well as an IT question as to how best to implement that. So we would look to IT and the clerk's office for support in evaluating options for council to consider.
Got it. Okay, thank you. That makes sense. I knew we did it somewhere, but then obviously the code then supersedes our rules and procedures. So that makes sense. Thank you so much for the update.
All right, Miss Opie, I think we're back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to add a couple components. Councilor Seymour had provided a couple areas that he had suggested the video platforms, potentially expanding to boards and commissions, live comment. And so I want to provide a little bit more background. The staff has been working on those different areas. We've been looking at the different platforms as far as how we have these meetings. Right now we use GoToWebinar. Most people are well aware of Zoom. There's also WebEx. They are all different conferencing solutions, and that our IT staff continues to evaluate the different ones. And right now this platform seems to work best for us. They do have some different components, and one of the things we're looking into is closed captioning capability with the GoToMeeting. But again, that's some modifications that need to be made, and we're not certain how that's going to play itself out. So they're getting pricing on that and getting some more details on that area. As far as it goes for boards and commissions, obviously that's one of the areas we recognize would be a logical next step. What we are trying to work out is first get city council comfortable back in the building and having their meetings in the dais, and then move to boards and commissions. One thing that we'll note is that we are working to get, previously at the dais, we could fit 14 people. And what we have done is spaced out the dais so that now there's only 7 people at the dais, and that the city attorney and city manager are behind city council, offset, so that they're not directly on the, they're on the dais, but they're not at the front rounded section. And the city clerk is sitting at the back of the room, again, trying to have that social distancing, again, with some plexiglass barriers as well. So those are variables that we have in place. The other thing that we're working on is actually installing or leaving set up on a regular basis is laptop computers at the dais for that video component, so that council would still bring in your laptop to utilize for the agenda and any other notes that you might have, but we would have a generally placed computer or laptop sitting there at the meeting, so that at least that technology for the AV portion is set up. Now that will not, unfortunately, they will not be available on April 12th. They are back ordered. It looks like we will hopefully have it in time for the next meeting. Of course, everything gets backlogged right when we're ready to go live. So, but we are working very diligently on that. As Michelle had mentioned, she'll be providing a list of things to make sure that you bring with you for that April 12th meeting. And you will unfortunately have to be juggling between your council agenda packet on your laptop as well as your video conferencing. And then other components as far as moving forward, we do currently have closed captioning after the fact. It's not real time on our YouTube channel, and that translates into over 100 different languages. And so we do have that capability. Currently, we are looking to see if there's ways that we can expand and be more live in real time. So I want to just acknowledge that we do have that capability currently, and we're working on those other enhancements. I think those are the main things I wanted to highlight for you. If you have other questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay, thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions on this comment, or can we move to item 2? All right, moving on. Councilor Smith, I believe this is yours. A request for an update on ADA processing or ADA access. I think that was one you submitted.
Yes, sir. That was mine. And it was just, and we've kind of touched a little bit on it tonight, making sure that we have access. And Ms. Opie just kind of alluded to some of that. So if there's any more updates that we could provide as far as providing full access on the website, as far as providing access for hearing and visual impaired, that would be helpful. And then anything that outside of that would be helpful as well for any updates. That would be incredibly helpful.
I know one of the things that we have that's on the agenda every week, that anybody who's asking for an accommodation of any kind is asked to submit their notice to the city clerk on the Thursday before, so that we can arrange for it, whether that's interpretation, sign language, or whatever. So that has always been there. But Barbara, why don't you see if you can go further than that? I've got a couple people that have questions.
Okay. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, for pointing out that the component that we do have on all the agendas that does note if folks need assistance, that they please contact the city clerk's office in advance so that we can try to make arrangements. The other thing is just to notice that on our website, we are working on those different enhancements. We've unfortunately had some turnover in our staff, so we have been short-staffed in being able to continue that area, but we're excited that we'll have somebody joining us here shortly. At least one member. We have another position that we still have vacant, but we're working on, again, expanding those accessibility opportunities as feasible while remaining those communication vacancies that we have and as we're filling those positions. But we're excited about those opportunities to enhance that area. Closed captioning, just want to note that that is an area that we have been looking into. As I mentioned, YouTube does offer that, but again, it's a post-production item. One area that IT is looking into is a post-production captioning within the GoTo platform itself also. Again, these are after the fact. We do believe that the GoTo platform might be a more accurate translation of the audio, but again, we're getting pricing on that and making sure we understand what the technology does entail for us to implement. And then lastly, as I mentioned, the YouTube also has a automated AI-based closed captioning component as well on the video player. Again, apparently there's a small CC button on your screens that you can toggle on at any time to generate English closed captioning. Again, those are more components that are set up in YouTube, and that we're looking at those opportunities to see where we can expand and how we can make it more viable for us to provide to the public, as well as make sure that it's sustainable long term.
Still with you, Councilor Smith, this is yours.
Thank you. I didn't know if we needed to do the chat or not, but my last question is with it posting on Thursday, with the agenda being posted on Wednesday evening for Thursday publication. What does that look like as far that doesn't give much time for people to ask for assistance when we don't have any office hours on Friday? So that's another concern for me as well, for if someone needed some kind of assistance. If we post, it only gives less than 24 hours. Let's say someone goes to work, doesn't look at an agenda until 5 o'clock that evening for asking for assistance, then they're out of luck for Monday's meeting. So that is also a concern. Have we thought about what that looks like outside of those office hours?
Barbara, I'll send it back to you and Michelle.
Thank you. So while that information is technically on a Friday, staff is always checking their emails over the weekend. And so that is something that the city clerk's office is looking for in case that comes up. And so, but that is part of the reason we're asking for assistance on Thursday, so that we have time. Candidly, most of the time it doesn't come in until Monday. And so we're rushing to try to make sure that we have those capabilities in place on Monday evening.
Okay.
Michelle, if there's anything I missed, if you would like to add to that, or if we're good, then we can continue.
Hi, no, thank you, Barbara. The only thing I want to add, and Councilor Smith, that is a really great concern. The timelines are rather tight, but part of that is also driven by the fact that our partners who provide these services require time to get staffing in place for us in time to have them in place for a Monday meeting. We certainly have scrambled in the past to get interpretation or translation services, but they also, just based on the agreements that we have with them, require at least 24 hours notice. And so usually if we're getting a request on Thursday or even on Friday or over the weekend, we do our best to check, as Deputy City Manager Opie said. But it does also put a squeeze on those folks who are then going to actually be coming to the meeting and providing those services. So that would be the only comment that I have regarding that timeline.
Thank you. And is there any possibility to maybe, since there is wiggle room in the deadline as far as someone requesting that assistance, that even though we asked for Thursday, but if they ask Friday, that's fine too. Are we able to post that? Because to me, if I look at that and ask for assistance, and I know that the city is closed on Friday, I feel just as a resident that I wouldn't be able to, that no one would be checking. It wouldn't be implied because it is a closed day for office hours. So is that something that we can maybe transition to say, by 5 p.m. on Friday or by noon on Saturday? Is that a possibility to have it be more of a window for people to have a response for?
We can certainly look at that and try and figure out how we would then ensure that staff is available on a non-business day, but we can certainly look into that and circle back with you.
Okay, thank you. I would appreciate that. Thanks so much. That's all my questions for now. Thank you.
Councilor DeMott.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilor Smith, for bringing this important thing forward and being a champion of it. I think it's really important that we look at stuff like this if we're to tout being inclusive. One of the questions I have is what we're doing in terms of our outreach for ADA accessibility. So we do a lot of different videos, and I've seen some things the city manager has done as far as video publications. Are we making sure that our outreach is also trying to reach folks that may be a concern? really strikes me when we talk about it's on our agenda, which I appreciate and I think that's good. But if folks don't know about our meetings or don't know that that's even a thing, there may still be a miss. And I know that's one of the things the Inclusivity Board really looks at, whether it's, whatever demographic, that we're making sure that we are allowing people to understand that these are opportunities for them to come and interact with their government. So is there somebody from potentially our communications team that's in charge of those areas that could speak to that?
I think, Brian, you're up. Just don't know if you have sound.
Thank you. Just wanted to make sure someone else didn't want to jump in first, but thank you, Councilor DeMott, for the question. We do have a cross-departmental team that is currently evaluating those needs that you referenced in terms of better supporting both the broadcast and accessibility needs of our public meetings. And I think you bring up a good point about opportunities to get the word out more proactively about council meetings and public meetings. And that's part of those considerations and recommendations that we're looking at for both needs and best practices for that.
That's good, and I appreciate that. I would also encourage you to, and I don't know how much we've done so far with the actual pushing out content, but in a variety of languages, be it Hmong or Spanish speaking. I know that we've done a lot of outreach between our mayors and our Asian community, but anytime that we can also invite those folks in so that they can come be a part of their government, I think is important. So I appreciate your work on that, and I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with.
Absolutely, and I'm happy to report that we are also working on the finalization of our language access plan for the city, and that will be our guiding document for our translation and interpretation services, and be the roadmap for us for continual improvement. We know that when it comes to inclusion and accessibility, you never fully arrive, but there's always the opportunity to do more, and that will chart those next steps for us, especially as we bring on new staff to support our communication as a city.
That's great to hear. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I just wanted to say thank you for the conversation. I know really, I think almost the first year that I got on council, we started working on trying to expand ease of access to city council meetings when we were redoing the plaza, adding additional ramps to get up to City Hall. And as we redid City Hall, making sure that access, even our podium that raises and lowers, was not a barrier to participation. So I think this is part of that continued conversation. But I want to be clear, I do believe we're in compliance with ADA. I think that there was kind of an assertion maybe that we weren't, and that there was potential liability for us. But my understanding is that as of today, we're within compliance, but our goal is to always, as Mr. Hingerness just said, expand access. Is that correct? Long pregnant pause.
Also glad to jump in if needed, but yes, to your question, yes, the city is in compliance. We absolutely make accommodations to those that request them. And we believe that having our captioning available through the current platform, as well as multiple language options through the current platform, are satisfying our obligations. But as Mr. Heggernis indicates, absolutely, it's never just a one and done. We always seek to improve, and I think that's why the communications and IT and the clerk's office are researching options to better provide live captioning in addition to what is available on that web stream through YouTube.
I appreciate that answer. I just didn't want it to hang in the air that we were somehow out of compliance. And I do think that the overarching goal of inclusivity, engagement, and efficacy is something this council and previous councils cares a lot about, and that we should always be working towards. I want to go back to Councilor DeMont's question about promoting our meetings. And one of the things that we've learned from COVID is we can really meet people where they are in their homes. And that really addresses, as Councilor Seymour said earlier today, a host of challenges people have to participation. And so I'm very excited about the opportunities that this brings us. We used to have as council a person in communication and outreach that was really dedicated to making sure that our efforts were getting out to the public. That was back under Alexa Purdy. I'm not sure. I believe Angela Simatel took her position. I think she's moved on in the organization. Do we have anybody that is their kind of purpose right now, is to make sure council's activities, our meetings, our goals are communicated to the public at large?
At this time, that is being supported by Cody. We have numerous staff wearing multiple hats as we have a variety of vacancies from a communication perspective, but that's certainly something that we are looking at adding that function back in and providing more support. So as we begin to fill positions, and I'm happy to report that we have several in progress right now, I think you'll see more improvement and opportunities to support in that regard.
Well, it amazes me how many hats Cody can wear and get the job done so well. So I appreciate that, and I'm happy to hear there might be some relief for her. Because to Councilor DeMont's point, we work for the community. They need to know what we're working on, and we need to make sure we're meeting them where they're at. So thank you.
Councilor Scully.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to thank all the work that's been done on this as well. I work on a lot of DEI work at the college, and one of the things that we've been working on is how do we close equity gaps. And some of those equity gaps are created by language barriers. And so I really enjoy the conversation, appreciate it, especially around finding ways to provide ways to lower our barriers with language, especially through closed captioning and interpreters and anything we can do. So I just wanted to chime in and say I'm in support of this. I think it's a great idea. Appreciate you bringing it to light, Councilor Smith and Councilor DeMont. Thank you.
Any other comments on this item? All right, Mr. Frankel, if you'll come back on the screen, I think the next two items are yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'd like to respond to the first of the two, which was update regarding the status of ballot language for the question to be put forward this fall regarding establishment of a commission to explore charter amendments creating wards. And wanted to report back that with regard to the election timelines, we have adequate time, and we will be presenting to City Council language for your consideration. And the plan is to put forward an information-only presentation to City Council in the spring, get feedback, and also then schedule it for late July or early August for setting of the ballot language. That would give us plenty of time, I believe, because the county clerks who run the elections require that the language be certified to them not later than end of August, beginning of September. So we want to be mindful of that deadline and also leave time if there are requested amendments to the proposed language that we can bring them back onto the next meeting. So I believe that we will have language for your consideration. I can report that the policy and budget team has done a good job of trying to learn from other jurisdictions' experience in this area, and it's been challenging because there are a very limited number of jurisdictions that have undertaken this type of process, but we are working to identify the consultants that have assisted other cities in this area so that we will have their support, if at all possible, in making sure that the process, should it be desired, be one that incorporates community input and outreach, because it's obviously it'll be a complex subject for the commission to take on. We want to be sure that they have the tools that they need to be successful. So with a ballot ballot setting for the county clerks being due at the end of August, beginning of September, I think we're going to have plenty of lead time to put that forward for City Council's consideration. Do you have any questions regarding that particular question?
Yes, you have one, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you so much for that update, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with. My question to the team, I guess, rather, is it was my recollection that this, while definitely would include wards, that perhaps there was room to also investigate improving our campaign practices. And, you know, I would hope that maybe we could look at campaign finance in Westminster. I find it interesting that we have no limits on campaign donations, you know, that sort of stuff. And so I'm wondering if we're going to be looking at this, if we should perhaps look at that as well. So just wanted to throw that out to my colleagues. I guess I had presumed this was going to be a little bit more holistic of an election look. And if I'm on my own, I understand that, but I just felt timely to ask for clarification.
The only thing that I'm aware of that the group came to a consensus on was the language for the proposal to ask the question of whether or not a study should be done about wards and districts. I don't think anything was done or covered at that meeting as far as I can recall on campaign finance.
It actually, I thought, was more broadly talked about elections in Westminster. Maybe I'm incorrect. Does anyone remember the exact language that staff kind of showed us?
If it's helpful, we do have a resolution that City Council passed directing staff to put this question together, and I can have that recirculated for City Council's benefit.
I think that would be helpful, because I think I must be misremembering now of looking at my colleagues' faces. So.
And just in reference to campaign finance issues, so that all are aware, there's a provision in our charter that requires that council members who have been given a campaign contribution, I believe in excess of $100, disclose that on the record should the donor be coming forward for an approval before City Council. So for the benefit of all, I'm also glad to redistribute that charter provision to the extent that it does address one aspect of campaign finance. And Mr. Lindsay, I think, has potentially something to add here. Chris?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Frankel. I was just going to read for everyone the language that was passed by council last year, resolution number 28. Now therefore be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Westminster as follows. The City Council hereby directs city staff to draft and present for City Council consideration language for a November 2021 ballot question, which would establish a commission to explore future charter amendments creating wards for the election of City Council members.
Could I maybe interject, Mayor Pro Tem Sites, because I think there was a component that we talked about, I think that maybe even I brought up, that wasn't necessarily in the guise of campaign finance reform, but I think one of the things that I've consistently heard from different areas of the city and proponents of awards and district system is that it's very expensive to run in an at-large capacity the way that we do. So I just wanted to at least bring that forward, because I do remember at least talking about that portion of it. So there was some finance, but I don't remember in the light of what, you know, of like trying to reformat the finance piece of it. It was more around the fact that we think that increases opportunity for more folks to be able to run, no matter what part of the city you live in, because then you have a more narrow focus that you're going to have to spend money to get your message out and your name and all the things that we've gotten used to when we've had to run campaigns.
That was my recollection as well, Councilor DeMont, was that we were looking for ways to lower the barrier of entry for candidates to increase diversity of candidates. And so, you know, one way to do that is there had been some talk about having wards that still have everyone run at large, which concerned me, because then you still have the problem of having to fund a campaign for the whole city. You know, another way to do that is to, you know, make sure that people with friends with deep pockets or deep pockets themselves can't just, you know, instead of working with the community, work with only those maybe interested stakeholders. So my apologies for misremembering. I'm glad I'm not completely crazy about the conversation, but I'm happy to go forward with what we approved prior. So my apologies, everyone.
Okay, Councilor Scully.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, Councilor Demont said what I was going to say, which was that words create a more equitable situation for our residents who wish to run for office, because it reduces the amount of money they would have to pay toward a campaign and the amount of literature and signs and information they would have to purchase in order to run a good campaign. So I'm very much in favor of this and look forward to getting this on our ballot. Thank you.
Councilor Demott, did you have something else?
No, sir.
All right. Any other comments or questions on this item?
Just to provide a little extra detail, if I could, Mr. Mayor, the charter section that I'm referencing is 512.1, and it's entitled Conflicts Based on Prior Pecuniary Benefits, and it describes the creation of a conflict of interest where there's a campaign contribution in excess of $100, and that's going to also require the disclosure on the record and the recusal of the member who had received the donation. But I'm aware, obviously, other cities are looking at campaign finance. And I do appreciate your point that the wards question has campaign finance ramifications, obviously, as you pointed out. So thanks.
All right, Mr. Frankel, let's go to your next one, item 4.
Sure. The next question is relative to ballot timing. If a question were to be placed on the November ballot this year for voters to consider either taking the sunset off of our open space tax, I believe was the question. Pull it up so I have it precise here. But the sunset provision, so it could be either extended or eliminated for the parks, open space, and trails tax. And the current tax sunset, I believe, expires in 2031. And so that could be put forth if there was council interest in placing a question before the electorate this year that could either extend or remove that sunset language. And the same ballot timing would apply. So it would need to be finalized essentially by the end of August. So I would recommend that if there is council interest, that we start planning ahead of that so that we can have some language ready for your consideration, ideally in July, because there may, as with the other question, be a desire to make modifications so that we could put it on for a full public hearing, or so that people would be aware of the proposal, and there would be time for City Council to vote on it ahead of the clerk's deadline. So to the extent that the deadlines are the same, hopefully that helps with the question. Whether that's a desired question for the voters, I obviously defer to City Council. And if that's something that you would like to direct staff to prepare, we will.
Councilor Vols.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Frankel, for that answer to the question. My one concern would be, and then I'll get into some other points, but my concern is that pushing this off until August, we want people to know this is going to be on the ballot. So that seems like a really tight time frame to wait that long and kind of push it to the end of summer. I think if people want to be involved and we're out doing what we do as council members at meetings and town halls, or if we do those again someday, we get those out there with those kind of issues. I think we need people to know that this is going to be on the ballot sooner rather than later. So I guess my question is, why are we pushing it to August? Are you just suggesting that's the kind of end, as late as we can go with the city
Correct.
clerk and our rules? Okay. Right.
Yeah, the county clerks who operate the elections just require that they have the language finalized end of August, beginning of September. Agree, though, that if this is something the council wishes, it would be prudent to start sooner than later so that we could have outreach efforts and public meetings where this is explored.
Okay, good. Thank you. I very much support this. I would support eliminating the sunset altogether. I think, we look at the long-term maintenance of these properties and maybe even some partnerships down the road. I know we're almost at build out, but there's going to still continually be opportunities to do some connections, some trail connections. I think this revenue source for open space and trails is very important to the quality of life of our city. So I would very much support doing something along those lines. And if staff could kind of research kind of the ramifications of that, I think that would be tremendous. What shows up over and over in every city survey we do of our residents, this is the number one issue. This is the most supported thing we do, the most the item that has the most support of anything or any service we provide. So I do believe it is our brand. I believe people move here because we have such a great trail system and open space, but we need to maintain that. So I think if we're adding to that, which we, just this year, we worked hard to get our open space acquisition fund from, about 250,000 to more like around the tune of 1.4 million. If we're going that route, then I think we want to be certain that we have long-term maintenance secured. Now I will just say, Adams County did this just in the last election, and I think it passed by 80% or 82%. It's the same thing, and I think it's very popular. I think, but it's up to the voters. If it doesn't pass, it doesn't pass. But I think it's something we want to get on the ballot as soon as possible. And we're getting to the point where we're 10 years or less away from the sunset. I think we probably don't want to have that uncertainty. So I would like to see us move on this and move quickly, actually. So I would. Those are my thoughts, and I'd like to hear what my colleagues have to say.
All right, Councilor DeMott.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilor Voles, for bringing this important thing forward. I do question whether or not this is the right year, and I know that people care a lot about our open space, but it's a year where people are still really hurting, and as a money question, is this the right year for that? I mean, 10 years. It goes by quick in the realm of life, but that is an amount of time. So with that being a question, can staff remind us when this was put in place? How many years has this current one been in place?
Councilor DeMott, the original question was, excuse me, 2006, and the expiration is 2032. So I was off by one. It's 2032.
I guess the other question that I would ask is, do we, staff put any thought into, is it a favorable year? I mean, that's something that we've looked at other times where we've talked about sales tax increase or, other revenue sources and ballot questions. And, and I know we've turned away from things like that because the feedback that staff gained was not favorable for it. And so again, with the year of economic downturn, is it the right year?
So with council directing staff, I think we would absolutely be willing to undertake that question and bring back recommendations for council's consideration. And I'd also point out, obviously with an election question, I'd recommend that the conversation occur ahead and in a way that you include stakeholders that you want to include. But once the ballot language is set, I think the safest way for the city to take a position on the question would be by way of a resolution. I don't think we would be spending public funds to either promote or discourage the result, but a resolution is something that's absolutely within City Council's discretion to pass in advance of the election.
Well, and so I think, and for two reasons. One, I think in instances where you've seen this kind of thing pass, it's because it's been well defined. And if I were to support something, such as continuing this, it would need to be well defined. So I certainly welcome the conversation, whether or not we end up putting it as a ballot this year. I do think Councilor Voles is right. This has to be addressed at some point, because if it doesn't continue, then you have to figure out resources to maintain those open spaces and parks ongoing. So I certainly welcome the conversation, but I would also like to make sure that it would be done in a way that's well defined at what the funds would be spent specifically on, and have some rails around it. For one, because I think that's the most responsible thing to do. But for two, I think that it also really defines for the residents what they're voting on and frankly, whether or not they want to support it. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Councilor Scully.
I too would be in support of this putting this on the ballot. I think that this is an important issue. We have to find ways that we continue to fund what's valuable to our citizens, and I think this would be an acceptable issue. So I support this.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Frankel, for your kind of explanation of the timeline and what we need to do and by when. First off, I'm going to say, similar to Councilor Voles, I was overwhelmed by the response that the initiative in Adams County received, eliminating their sunset, particularly as last November was kind of the heart of the financial pain from COVID. And I do think that there has been kind of a renaissance in our open spaces. And I think it's also been egged on by people's maybe fatigue of growth and development, right? Wanting to make sure that they maintain some of the character in their community. And so I think that this could be a really clear symbol to residents that we're committed to that, and we're committed to making sure there's a revenue source in perpetuity, and maybe taking some of that anxiety away. So I am supportive, in addition to my other colleagues, of at least continuing the conversation about removing the sunset. I did want to ask, since we have so little developable land left that we could preserve as open space, would we want to consider adding like a couple year accelerator so there would be a bigger pot of money, but that doesn't go on into perpetuity for a few years to allow us to purchase some of these parcels before they're gone? I just wanted to see if that's something that A, is even legal, or B, makes sense. And if I was not clear in what I'm asking, please ask for clarification.
Chris, go ahead, please.
So on any ballot initiative, we could certainly ask for bonding capacity, which I think would accomplish generally what you're looking for, Mayor Pro Tem sites. And in fact, the 2006 ballot initiative included bonding capacity. I think if we want to go with bonding capacity, which gets that upfront cash, we would definitely want to remove the sunset or extend the sunset, because it would be on a abbreviated payback period right now.
That makes a lot of sense.
If it appears that there's strong support to maximize our ability to, in the short term, utilize this as a source to enhance open space, in the long term, secure funding for maintenance of it into perpetuity. If we get a clear direction on that tonight, the staff will do all the research and give you all the options, and we'll probably even do some polling to give you some idea of what this looks like in the electoral environment. And we'll do that as quickly as we possibly can, so you have options. But you can be certain that when we come back to you, we're going to bring you something that we believe is winnable at the ballot box, and that is supported and meets your goals.
Thank you. Well, I am supportive of going forward, and thank you, Chris, for interpreting my question in the most intelligent way possible. You made me makes more sense than I could communicate it with. So thank you.
Councilor Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was heartening to see the ADCO vote and how residents got behind that. But I have a fundamental belief that all taxes should have a sunset that then can be reauthorized. And so because of that belief, I think that we should, I would prefer that we wait till 2031 and have our residents reauthorize it at that point. It gives them that opportunity. I'm sure it would be overwhelming. If it was coming up this year because of the sunset, I believe that they would vote overwhelmingly to reauthorize it again for another period, whatever that may be. But I'm not in favor of removing sunsets. So thank you.
Mr. Bowles, I'll come back to you in a minute, since I've got one more that hasn't talked. I'll get her, and then I'll come back to you. Councilor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say that I'm in support of getting this on the ballot. I just don't think that this is the right time, and for a variety of reasons. And I appreciate Mayor Pro Tem asking about what does that look like as far as accelerating? What does that look like now versus 10 years from now? Or not 10 years, gosh, we're coming up on close to 8 and 9 years, closing in on that sunset gap. But I think at this point, for getting feedback from our community, if that's the case, and I would want it to be the case, what I've heard in the last just 6 months is the polling and the surveying of our residents is overwhelming. And as far as going into an election year, not just for our city, but for others as well, for other ballot issues, it can become monotonous, and the noise of this, it's so important, but the noise of this and other issues that we have, especially with the ward and district item going on to the ballot, and then adding this potentially onto it, can, I feel, muddy the water as far as getting the information that we need to make sure that that is on track with what our residents want. We've heard constantly with the ward and district ballot initiative that that's what they want. But this one, I would have to agree with Councillor Seymour in his statements that looking at it in 2031, when it's about to sunset, or even maybe the year prior, 2030, to look at what this would look like for our residents. I just think that it's so far out, and it's good to have an eye on it. I just think it's too far out at this point to really dive into and have a ballot issue this year. And then I'm in total agreement with the maintenance. You need to have, and I've said this to residents as well, you need to have an understanding of where your funding comes from for maintaining what you have, what we've committed to. And so that's also important. But I'm just, the timing of it right now is just not, for me, it doesn't seem right. And so, while I'm supportive, just not the right time.
Councilor Bowles.
Thank you, and I want to thank my colleagues for a good discussion on this. I do have a question. I guess I don't know who would be the person. When was the last time we had a ballot question? A question go on the ballot, because there's some concern that we're inundating them with too many ballot questions. When was the last time we did that in Westminster?
Somebody's going to have to remind me of the year, but it would have been the firefighter collective bargaining.
Collective bargaining, I believe. Yeah.
2006, Dave.
And then before that, what issue do we have before that? I guess my point is, it doesn't seem like, so crowding the ballot with too many questions for our voters. I think we want to hear from our voters. That for me, that's not an issue. I understand that the point you're making, but it doesn't seem like we're overwhelming them with ballot questions, is I guess my point.
Can I clarify? Sorry, I don't mean that. Yeah. That's not what I meant as far as asking our voters and putting that on the ballot. I just feel that we continually ask our residents, how do you feel about water? How do you feel about this? How do you feel about this going on the ballot? How do you feel about, so I feel like I just feel like it gets lost as far as what we're asking for, and how many survey and interest community questions that we sent out. And I don't know if that's a part of our communication problem, but I definitely wasn't talking about muddying the water as far as like the ballots and what we're asking and having on that ballot. I'm saying that if we're asking for this all year long, will it get lost in the noise as far as what we're asking from our residents and what they want?
Okay, well, thank you for that clarification, Council. I appreciate that. And then as far as this year, this year we saw like between a 200 and 400% increase in our trail usage. So, I mean, the fact that it's COVID and it is this year, it seems like this is an important issue, and people are using our trails and our open space more than ever because of the year that it is. So I don't see this financially hurting people. This is something already in place. So I guess those I don't agree with those. I appreciate people raising those. I think it's a good discussion. I thank my colleagues for raising good points. I just simply don't agree with that. I think we should have it on the ballot and see what our voters want. I think having this ballot question on there, then we can find out is this what they want. If not, then we know. And then we have to adjust maintenance down the road and consider it down the road and what we do now. So I think it's for long-term kind of continuity is I guess what I'm trying to get at. So I think if we could do it this year, that's what I would support. And I hear my colleagues and I understand you have your concerns, and I'm glad we're having this discussion now. I think it's important to have it now versus later in the year. So thank you for raising those points. I appreciate it.
Mayor Pro Tem.
That's all I have.
Thanks. I have a quick question for Councilor Seymour. I understand from him that, a removal of sunset is just something that value-wise, that's not something that he can ever get behind, regardless of the cost. And so I wanted to ask if there was an extension that was maybe 30 years. The reason being is really trying to capture that open space while it is still available, and so allowing us a bonding timeline that would allow us to make some immediate capture. So that, I guess I wanted to see if there was some support if we did something like that, because, I want to respect where you're at, but also I want to ultimately preserve what we can and have a long-term revenue stream to maintain it.
And Mayor Pro Tem, thank you for asking that question. I would not, that phase of that would not bother me at all. I'm just like, I like to have the opportunity to have all taxes sunset at some point. But if our voters come back and say, hey, we want to extend this now, we want to roll it into a new 30-year, that's the voters, that's their will. So.
Thank you. I would be, I would like to get rid of the sunset, but if it could get it to a ballot initiative, I'd be willing to consider that amendment. I will tell you consistently, we have seen in numerous surveys, people clamoring for open space, some concern about growth. I have not seen a huge demand of getting wards and districts on the ballot. And yet I'm still supportive of that. Let's go for and let the voters decide. But this is something that is really fundamental to our community and a source of anxiety. If we didn't want to do another survey, what we could do is take a look at what percentage of Adams County residents in Westminster voted in support of their proposal. I think we have the data to show that this tracks pretty well, and it tracks pretty well in Westminster, and it's something that our residents talk about consistently. And there's a lot of benefits to doing this now while we have the ability before those parcels are gone. So that, to me, that's the type of stewardship that I think that we're being asked to provide by our residents. And I think it answers a lot of concerns. So I am supportive of going forward. And again, I'd be willing to accommodate some of the rules to meet the needs of my colleagues. And I don't necessarily think it's smart to go into an election without polling, but I don't think it's necessary on this one either.
Councilor DeMont.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm kind of curious, and this is, I guess, for Mayor Pro Tem and Councilor Voles. I agree people are wanting more open space and less development. 100% have heard that. I don't know how necessarily the sunset right now feeds into what we're doing immediately and what the concern has been immediately. I understand that gives you more bonding over a period of time, but I'm trying to understand why now. What raised this to the level of now? This isn't open space. Yeah, 100% agree with Mayor Pro Tem sites. Something people are concerned about. They want to see more. I've been very, pleased that we've been putting some emphasis as a whole group on that and trying to figure out ways to support that. I've seen, all hands on deck with that. So with that being said, though, again, why now? And I think that Councilor Seymour's point is a valid one for a couple of reasons. One, I too would like it to sunset, but that doesn't necessarily also mean that it goes away. Like we've seen that in school bonding where one drops off and then they're able to reevaluate where they're at. Whereas if it's in perpetuity, you know, at some point you just come back and have to pile on and do another one, opposed to something that might be right sized for where you're at in your needs of revenue. So I'm just curious, you know, kind of what's the push for today? And I haven't heard anybody say that they're not supportive of this. I agree. Our parks and open space are kind of who we are. They always have been, you know, my whole life that I've lived here. So I'm just curious for some input on that, and maybe that would help me be a little more comfortable with us moving this forward this year.
Right. So I think that that's a really good question, and I think it's one that we should address. The idea to me of removing the sunset or moving it back allows us to bond at a level high enough that we could actually make purchases beyond, you know, what we've been able to put in our budget, which with how expensive land is now, that's going to be really difficult to make some meaningful purchases. And so to me, why now is because this is an issue that's really reached a fever pitch. People are using our open spaces more. There's more anxiety about the loss of them, right? Private parcels that are developing now, people think are open spaces being developed, right? So there's more anxiety in the community about it. And open space is one of those things where it's now or it's never, right? And so trying to capture it while it still exists is the sense of urgency that I have. And so that is why I was pushing for it. You know, once those spaces are developed, they're gone. So that's why it makes sense. If the concern about the sunset is really a deal breaker for you and for Councilor Seymour, I would be willing to say, let's do a 30-year continuation, you know, similar to we bond homes on 30 years, right? Because they're affordable when you do that. You can buy a really big purchase up front and break those payments up. 10 years would be pretty hard to be able to pay for any large purchase like that. So to me, that makes sense. And it answers a really strong need, I think, in the community. Need and desire. Does that make, I hope that's more clear. And if you have follow-up questions, I'm happy to answer them.
No, I think that is a very well thought out, and I understand where you're coming from. My ask would be, before we move forward with this actually being on a ballot, if we could get more sense around what is actually available out there in the city, that maybe this might give us the opportunity. So I don't know if that's like an executive session, but trying to understand feasibly what's actually available and what this would actually allow us to do would certainly help, you know, show the benefit in it, I believe, because I think that you made some good points, but I'd like to see, is there opportunity out there that, you know, is glaring that says, yep, this really helps us get there. So I think that would help me if we could get some sort of more information around that part of it.
Councilor DeMott, would you mind if I provide some response to your question too?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you. First of all, we can get you that information. I think that's a good request. There's a very long list that's been created over many, many years, and we've been focused right now on the immediate opportunities, but I think the staff is anxious to take you through that list and match up the council and the city's goals traditionally to what we have today. And I say that because there is a little bit of a different goal. One of the goals that I think this council has exacted is the potential of buying open space to control development to some extent in our community. And I'll just put that out there and say it that way. I don't think that's unwise. I think we've got a lot of land that in our city that is going to have a difficult time developing potentially, but might in fact protect some view sheds and do some other good for our city. But what I really want to say to you is that there's about $7 million a year right now coming from the post-tax income. And that money, for the most part, is maintaining the system that exists. And so I would have to tell you that without a certainty at some level of continuation of that revenue, it may not be totally responsible to add more responsibility to the overall corpus of responsibility that we have today. In other words, if the $7 million goes away, we're going to have a hard time maintaining our system. One of the values of the post-open space tax versus the other sales tax is it actually is a way that we've diversified our revenue. So for a number of reasons, I think we believe it's important to extend that. I understand your point, Councilor Seymour, and that's a philosophical position that I think many probably share. So I think it's good for you to bring it up, and it sounds like you've maybe come to some resolution as to how to meet both needs here. But I just want to emphasize that we do have that. We can provide that list, and I think I want you to really think about what happens if that money goes away in 2033, which will come quicker than you think. Thank you for the opportunity to respond.
I appreciate your response, Mr. Tripp. The thing I would also ask is when this comes back to us with more information, if we could also see what the original ballot initiative was, and any agendas around that, so that we can understand historically how this was originally pitched to the city and its residents.
Yeah, we can sure do that. It did change over time. It was originally initiated to just buy land, and then at some point the city got to a point where it decided it needed to have some revenue to actually maintain the land, and so it got changed. But we'll bring that and enumerate it, and I think we can get that to you in a report pretty quickly.
That'd be great, and I think that feeds into what I was saying about sunsets being nice, because then we could say, even if we extend it, is it right sized for our needs, to make sure that it's clear and concise and there's no question around whether or not we're using it for proper things. Because I have heard that before, where I've heard residents say that we should be using it just to purchase, probably ones who were here when it was originally put in place, versus using it to maintain. So I think that those will be good questions for us to address in a new ballot initiative.
Okay. All right,
Chris.
Good conversation, Council. Thank you.
Chris, is there anything that prevents us from doing bonding for open space today?
Do you mean without a tax increase, or without voter approval?
No, we have a 10-year time still left on the open space that exists today. Is there anything that prevents us from bonding against that revenue stream today?
No, sir.
Good. All right. Does anyone else got any other comments? I'm going to try to wrap this one. Right now, I don't see that there are 4 people that are supporting this on the ballot. I know I'm not ready to, and I've heard at least 3 others, not for this year. So what I would recommend is that we look at what the staff can bring back to us, to look at what are the impacts of this if we go forward. What do we have in mind of what they want to see purchased? How would we pay for it? And if there's a need to do something right now, we do have the ability, as Chris just stated, we can bond against the revenue stream that's already existing. We don't have to wait to a new ballot. So I'm going to recommend that based on where we are, we're not going to move forward with a ballot issue tonight. Hang on, Chris. But we'll have staff bring us back exactly what we were just discussing. What are the options? What happens if we go forward with a ballot initiative? What happens if we don't? What bonding capacity might we have? And if we wanted to use bonding before the end of the 30-31 timeframe, is there anything that prevents that? Because we do still have a steady stream for at least another 10 years of revenue.
If I could correct, and I think Dave was going to clean up for me also, additional bonding capacity would require a vote of the people on the existing revenue stream.
Correct. The existing revenue stream is, Mr. Mayor, if I could, I think that your question as to the constraints on current bonding capacity are the 11-year clock that is in place on this revenue stream. So that's the constraint. If you wanted to issue bonds that were repayable over 11 years or fewer, you would have a lower bonding capacity than if you had a longer sunset before the tax ended. But if I could just seek your clarification, because I appreciate your noting that there didn't appear to be 4 interested in putting a ballot question forward. I would just ask, I think the staff position was, would you like staff to do some research on this subject and make presentation to you? Chris, is that a fair a description of what
That's what I
the
think I was
question
just
is.
trying, I was just trying to say that bringing information back, we'll bring it into a study session. If that study session needs to be executive, because we're going to talk about potential properties that we'd be interested in, that's fine. As a couple of people have said, we can talk about that at the same time. All I'm saying is right now, I don't believe there's 4 people ready to support moving forward tonight to tell anybody to put it on the ballot in 2021. But put a staff report together, bring it back, and then we can discuss it in the executive session if need be. And I believe that's the direction we're telling you.
Thank you.
All right. Let's move on to our next item, item 5. Councilor Bowles, I think this is yours.
Yeah, this is an idea. You know, I had the pleasure of living, before I moved to the city I love, Westminster, I had a chance to live in a few other cities. And what they did do is they had civic leadership academies. So there were opportunities to have people trained in all departments, all of our core services and what our city does. Residents then can learn, sign up, apply, be accepted, and then have an opportunity to learn what we do as a city to make this city more livable, more sustainable, safer. I just think this is an opportunity for us to expand with communication and education about what it is we do as a city. And I think having that network and that grassroots folks apply and be involved, I think would be a benefit and help the quality of life of our city. So I would like to see us look into that. I know a number of cities in our region already do it. And I would like to see us do it as well. I also think it matches our objective 1.3, improve internal and external communication with emphasis on transparency and education on our services and delivery of those. So I think it's a good idea, and I think other cities have done it. It's been effective, and I would like to see us at least look into the possibility. I don't want to, I think it's a chance for our folks, our residents to network, and then they, in these opportunities of learning about what the city does, they have a chance to network and connect with other civic leaders during that time. It also then it increases the bench for people who are knowledgeable and leaders in the future for boards and commissions possibly, or city council in the future, you know, that type of thing. So I would just like to see us ask staff to look into the possibility of something like this proposal. I don't want to be too specific. I think we have outstanding staff who really can do a great job of fleshing this out, and I just wanted to put some general ideas out there, and then maybe they can come back with some ideas for us about what might be the possibility of a program like this.
Cody, you evidently have a comment you want to make.
I'm happy to let Councilor Scully begin. I see her in the comments as well. So.
All right, Councilor Scully.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Bowles, I so appreciate you bringing this forward. I did the Citizens Academy for the police department a couple of years ago, and after I did that, this was actually a question I also asked. And yes, we've had many cities that have popped this up since, and there's also a public works academy that's done through the state. There's a FBI Academy. There's so many of these, and it just makes sense. It's a great way for us to communicate with our citizens of what really happens behind the scenes. And certainly before I was on city council, I did not understand or have knowledge of how big a system this is, and how much work goes into it, how many staff play key roles, and what are the roles of the city councilors, and of each person who's playing a part in this city. So, and what is the responsibility of a resident? So I would wholeheartedly support this move. Thank you, Councilor Bowles, for bringing this forward.
Councilor DeMott.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilor Bowles, again for bringing this forward. I think this is a great opportunity. I did know a fair amount when I was seated, not to toot my own horn, but that's because I sat in meetings for 4 years every night and learned. And I think that there's a ton of knowledge that residents could get from seeing how their city is operated. which again, this is their government and they deserve to watch it. So if we could give a condensed version to show folks what happens at their government, I would be in full favor of that.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I'm also supportive of this idea. I actually have similar ideas throughout the years. I think Councilor Voles really succinctly described the idea and some of the benefits. I think one of the benefits he maybe mentioned or that I didn't catch, but is really helping residents learn how to be advocates for their neighborhoods, for their issues, understanding how government operates, where the different levers are. It's great to build a next level of leaders, not just for city council, but just to be able to advocate for their own concerns and issues within the city. So I think this is a great idea. I love building that civic literacy. So I also will be supportive and I can't wait to hear what staff's ideas will be.
All right, before I go back to staff, Councilor Seymour or Councilor Smith, do you have any comments on this recommendation? Okay, for Seymour. Councilor Smith, you have a comment?
Yes, I've been through lots of leadership academies. I think including Westminster, actually, Westminster Citizens Police Academy here. So I think it's a great opportunity here. I would need more information to fully support it, to know where we are within our budgetary process, because it does take, I know the startup of a leadership academy and what it is to maintain, and then a government facility type structure. It is literally the first to go when you're in a budget crisis. So that is something I would have to look at long term, but I'm very supportive of getting more information of what that structure would look like, and how, the participation in it. I'm all in agreement with. So.
All right, Miss Herb.
Well, it's your lucky night, City Council. Staff has been working on this off and on for the past probably 18 months, 2 years. It's changed hands a number of times and recently fell into my lap. So I've been lucky enough to speak with a number of other cities who do similar civic academies: Aurora, Commerce City, DRCOG, ICMA, Parker. So some of our neighbors and then some nationally, and have put together a draft plan and have gone through some preliminary steps in speaking with the executive leadership team, who ideally would be those who would host sort of a weekly, very similar to the city's fire academy and police academy, but broad, more in line with the departments as a whole, although fire and police do get to share one evening if all goes according to my plans. Ideally, we would like to launch such a program early this summer, probably in June. It looks like something around, I think I have it as an 8-week course with a graduation evening in mid to late August. Each department is covered. The idea is to begin with sort of a City Council Governance 101. What does your council do? How does it connect to to the staffing and the organization as a whole, and then launch into those sort of in a building structure. Ideally, we'll also be hosting at a variety of sites. So members of the community know that facilities like the water treatment facility or the Stanley Lake Nature site all belong in the city government structure and our facilities. So to really get a chance to bring community members in to not just meet the staff leadership and the people who do the work all day, every day, but also, what does it look like to be in streets or fleet, to be at the courthouse, but a pretty broad range. I won't quite get into depth in all the things that Public Works does or all the things that the clerk's office does, but certainly give a high level understanding in hopes of being there to answer more questions and make community members feel more welcome and invited to the table.
Councilor Voles, you have a comment?
Yeah, I just want to thank Cody for her comments. Clearly, she's way ahead out in front of this council member, so this counselor. So I want to say thank you. That's I look forward to seeing the details, of the program, and I brought it up not knowing there was that much work, and I'm glad to hear it. So if we can get those details, I look forward to that. Thank you, Cody, for your report and your hard work. Thank you.
Absolutely. Probably in your Thursday email this week, I'll work to get you a draft so you can put your eyes on it, and welcome feedback. I happen to be just getting ready to send the executive leadership team some emails tomorrow about next steps, drafting some letters and applications, things like that. So definitely the wheels are in motion. I appreciate the support of each and every one of you.
Councilor Scully.
I just wanted to thank Cody for her work. I happen to work on the Leadership Academy for the college, and it is a lot of work. We spend all year long planning for the next year, and we have 2 separate committees. So if you're doing this all by yourself, which I'm sure you have many staff helping you, but if you are spearheading this, you are an angel, and you're doing a great work, and I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Ms. Herb, I think there's a consensus of support for the concept of the academy that you're talking about, but I think there's also a consensus that people like to see what you're proposing before we roll it out and what impacts to any budget there may be.
Happy
so if you can get this
to.
put together and get that to us as part of a study session upcoming, and then we can have any final input from council before it gets rolled out.
Sounds good, sir.
I want the blessing of all those who have to participate in this training as well.
Right.
Like Dave Frankel, Don Tripp.
It's true. That's why I asked the executive leadership team first if they'd be willing to support and participate. The intention is that staff will be leading each week. There will be a grouping of 2 to 3 who will lead each program. So we're not bringing anybody in. The biggest expense would be whether or not we purchase dinners and that sort of thing. The fire academy has or the police academy, I know for sure, does a round table, and you sign up the first week. I think they get pizza the first week and graduation dinner from Los Arcos. So we can look at a similar model for that. I think budgetary requests will be pretty minimal because it will be staff time and staff in city facilities.
Okay, all right. Well, we look forward to your report as soon as it's ready. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that completes the items that we had on our agenda tonight. We are making great headway about getting done before midnight. Councilor Scully, congratulations again. And then we will have kind of a recurring kind of a wrap up.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask one last question?
Sure.
I know it's not on the list, but it was just an outstanding item that we didn't get to touch base on at the last Monday meeting. But I think there was an email going around about comp land use changes and what that looks like between 2014 and 2020. And I haven't seen an email on that. And I was just wondering if we could have an update on where that's at, because I know that we got 2018 to 2020, but haven't seen the previous years.
The last thing I saw on it, there were only 3 people who supported that, Councilor Smith. I did not see a 4th come in.
Do we have any?
I would be fine. And I apologize. I was planning on emailing today that I would be fine with the staff hours to get that answer. And my apologies for not responding sooner to the request. I know Councilor DeMont emailed it and then also asked us on last Monday's meeting, and I just dropped off. My apologies.
Okay. Mr. Tripp.
We're more than happy to do that. My question was really less about hours and more about content. When we do this kind of work, it's helpful to make sure we've got everybody's questions because the people working on this issue. So the more that we know about what the collection of this data does for you and what policy you may be considering or what impact it has on current policies you're looking at, the more productive it is for us to be able to answer your questions. Many times you'll ask a question and we think we know where you're headed maybe, but if we don't have some idea of what that is in a partnership, right, it's not as effective in serving you. So I would just ask if there's, I understand the question, but is there something about that? Is there something that Councilor DeMott, you're wanting to try to assess that might help us with other questions that may be there? So it isn't the hours so much for me as it is just the thoroughness of the research that we can do at the time and get everything we can in one sitting versus a question that doesn't quite get there, then another question that doesn't get there, that sort of thing. But that's really, it's your choice as to whether you do it that way, but it would help us.
I know for myself, and thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. This was Councilor DeMott's ask, and one of my questions in this is that it was a great chart that was put forward in the email as far as 2018, 2019, and 2020, and it laid out the original land use, the updated land use, the impact, and then the qualitative descriptor of what that impact was. And that was incredibly helpful, especially to see in sequence those years. But for me, looking specifically at the 2013 comp change all the way till now is helpful in understanding for our water discussions coming up. I would say May. I know that we're going out to ask the public on their thoughts on the water rates, but to me, this goes back to water rate discussions. This also goes back to, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor Pro Tem, but this goes back to, I believe I supported the ask as far as looking at what does negligible mean and what does that look like from the smaller portions of the comp changes to the larger portions in the aggregate. So looking at that in totality from the time that we changed the comp plan till now that we're now looking at in the entirety of changing the comp, or updating, not changing, but updating the comp plan for 2020, or excuse me, 2021, that would be helpful for me. So if that's not clear in the ask for me, let me know and I can certainly try to re-describe, but that's for me what I'm looking for. And obviously everybody has their own thoughts to that too.
So Councilor Smith, you're wanting to try to understand the relationship between comp plan changes and water use.
Correct.
Is that accurate?
Yes.
Good, thank you. That helps.
Frankly, I'm kind of still don't understand the question. I mean, you just even said that you understand what was asked for. It was asked during the water discussion. It was very clear that just what you just stated, that was the same thing I wanted to know. I wanted to know what were the comp use plan changes and what does that look like for water supply in a measurable amount. And I was told that I missed, and I took accountability. I did miss that there was something provided. It was provided as negligible. That's not a measurement that I was looking for. In those things that staff has provided for us to go look at, I went and did some research on what they pointed me to. Mr. Downing in one of those recordings talked about, I think it was 1,277 dwelling units. I think that it's important that we understand each of those comp use land changes. And to Councilor Smith's point, you guys did lay out very well how many were changed in each of those years. And I just want to know what that means in terms of acre feet or gallons or some sort of measurement of water that we typically would see. I will say, I know that Mayor Pro Tem reminded me that, this is something that she had pushed for years ago, to be able to see, the aggregate of what the impact of a year was. I think I'm saying that right as far as what you asked for, Mayor Pro Tem. So it's, I think it's important for us to understand, and for the public to understand when we have a plan and we deviate from it, what does that actually do to our supply? I mean, we have a finite amount of water, and we have a finite amount of land, as we were talking about earlier, when it comes to open space. So we really need to understand the impact of these kind of decisions that we make.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem, you have a comment.
I think maybe I thought, and the staff thought, that the presentation that we made a week I believe a week ago Monday or maybe 2 weeks ago, that spoke to this issue, had addressed it. And so I thought maybe there was something else, because what we reported was that the comp plan changes had a very minimal impact compared to actually conservation of water. But we'll go back and try to quantify that in the number of acres feet. That's a fair question, and I believe we can do that without Public Works and Utility staff being here, but we'll do that. Is there anything else that anybody else has while we do this, that along that line, that we can connect to this and try to make sure we've got everybody's questions answered through this? And we'll take whatever time's necessary to get all this done. And because it's taken time, Councilor DeMott, which I apologize for, we should be quicker and more responsive to meet your needs. We'll make this a priority and try to get this to you as quick as we can.
I would ask in that, and this was a follow-up when you guys brought up the dwelling units, when I went back and researched the recording that Mr. Downing stated that if you could easily match up the dwelling unit changes per year in those, just so we could see it, like, okay, this many dwelling units in 2014, this many comp use changes, and I've seen it in a variety of, the only thing I haven't seen fully is acre feet per year. So if we could just see that in you've given us some good charts, they just weren't complete. So I just would like to see the full scope of years with those data points side by side. I think it would be very useful, and I think it would be very informative for the council.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, you have a comment.
I do. So I'm supportive of Councilor DeMont's request being answered and the research time involved with it, even though staff has answered this question, but not quantitatively, with that negligible, which was defined for us. So for anyone listening that was not part of the conversation a few weeks back with Sarah Borgers going over the water supply plan, our old system, the smallest measurement of that they did was 100 acre feet. So negligible means with under 100 acre feet. We do have a new system, which is why some years they were able to give us very specific data on a much more granular level of how many acre feet the changes made. And so Councilor DeMont's request will require that they go back and input all the old data into the new system. So it will take time. But it will give much more specific information of exactly, how many acre feet difference it is. This is an issue. I think we had 10 hours of conversations on water rates because we all wanted to be operating on the same data. And if there's distrust or concern still about that data, to me, it's well worth the investment to make sure we all have the same information to then make policy decisions on. And so I'm happy to support that. I will tell you every single comp plan amendment that I've been on council that was ever passed, I always asked about the water, impact on water. When we moved from having a service commitment, one of the things I wanted to see was an update multiple times a year on what is the aggregate water impacts. So we have, this has been an ongoing conversation. Councils before this one have cared quite a bit about the nexus between land use and water budgeting. And I think to have more accurate data won't hurt the conversation and may help. So I'm very supportive of this. And if it turns out I'm wrong and I've made missteps, I will own it as well. But it doesn't hurt to shine some more light on it, in my opinion. And I apologize for the additional staff hours that it'll take, but I think it's well worth it.
Councilor Vols.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also want to support Councilor DeMont's request. I don't know how many votes we have and how many we need and all that, but I know our protocols say after so many hours of research, we need council. So I just want to say I agree with Councilor DeMont's request, and Mayor Pro Tem Sites. I think it was very articulate in saying why it's necessary. So I would support that as well. Thank you.
He has the support he needs.
And I want to apologize. I didn't say this, and I should have. Staff did not have the ability to just fulfill that request without coming to council. Otherwise, they would have been violating our protocols. So Councilor Vols brings up an important point. We have a protocol that staff does need to get the approval of at least 4 council members before doing a research project that takes beyond 3 hours. And the reason is we just want to make sure we're good stewards of the taxpayers' dollar, that, you know, one person isn't using all of the staff capacity for their own personal research projects. So I didn't want anyone to infer that I was frustrated that we didn't get the information. I appreciate the check-in. This responsibility falls on me for not responding earlier.
Mr. Tripp, do you have any questions in regard to the requests that are being asked for this report?
I don't, but that's not as important as the people that are doing the work not having any questions. And if they do, we'll be doubling back immediately.
Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our meeting for tonight. The information you provided, and I think we've answered all the questions. There are still some coming back from staff in the near future. And this is the second of our round tables. We'll see another one in the upcoming quarter on another 5th Monday. If we don't have a 5th Monday over the next 3 months, then we'll take one of our study sessions for the round table. Enjoy your night. You're out early. Councilor Scully, thank you. Congratulations on another one before midnight. We'll see everyone.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Next Monday.
Good night, everybody.
Have a good evening.